If you've ever picked up a popular American history book in, say, the last 50 years, you've probably come across the name David McCullough. He was an absolute master storyteller, a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner who got millions of people to genuinely fall in love with the past. But here's the thing, he wasn't your typical academic historian, not by a long shot, and to really get what made him so special, we have to dig into his core philosophy.
Right here, this single quote, it's pretty much the key to his entire approach. For McCullough, history wasn't some dry collection of facts you had to memorize for a test. No. It was a grand, unfolding human drama, just packed with emotion, consequences, and unforgettable characters. It was a story. And lucky for us, we've got this unique window into his mind through his final book, a collection of essays called History Matters, which was published after he passed away. It's almost like one last dispatch from America's storyteller, and it really helps us answer a pretty fundamental question about his incredible success. I mean, how did he do it? How did he take subjects like the Brooklyn Bridge or John Adams and turn them into these gripping, best-selling, can't-put-them-down kind of books? What was his secret sauce? Well, to understand the writer, you first have to understand his philosophy. It all kicks off with this simple but really profound distinction he made about his own identity, and it might actually surprise you. See? That distinction is everything. He was a writer first. History was simply his canvas, his chosen subject. And that one little shift in identity changes absolutely everything about how he approached his work. It wasn't about winning some academic debate. It was about telling a true story that could grab a reader and not let go. This mindset completely blew the doors open on the scope of his work. Where conventional history often stays in its lane, politics, social issues, or these deep academic debates about history, McCullough was like, nope, let's bring it all in. He believed history was also about music and poetry and science and money and love, the full, messy, beautiful spectrum of human life. And for him, this wasn't just some hobby. It was a moral calling. He felt that ignoring the people who came before us, the ones who built our world, who fought for the laws we live by, the freedoms we enjoy, was a profound kind of ingratitude. History wasn't a luxury. It was a map, an aid to navigation in perilous times. Okay, so that's the philosophy, the why. But how did he translate those big ideas onto the page? What was his actual process? Let's get into the how. You see, he never wanted to be the expert in the room. In fact, he specifically chose subjects he was curious about but didn't know much about. His very first book, on the Johnstown flood, was sparked just by stumbling across some old photographs at the Library of Congress. He saw them, he got curious, realized there wasn't a good book on the topic, and just decided, well, I guess I'll write one. That detective-like hunt, born from pure curiosity, fueled every single project he ever did. His method was all about immersion. First, pick a topic you know nothing about so you get to feel that thrill of discovery right alongside the reader. Second, you have to physically go there. He thought it was absolutely essential to smell the air and walk the ground. Third, cast a super wide net for sources, not just official documents, but personal diaries, photos, interviews, anything to capture that human element. And finally, and he said this was the part people often skip, just think, let the ideas marinate. And his tools were just as unique as his philosophy. Get this, he wrote every single book on a 1940s Royal typewriter that he bought back in 1965. I mean, think about that. It wasn't about speed, it was about being deliberate, making every single word count. And that same care applied to his whole process. He was a constant rewriter who believed in reading his work aloud, convinced that if the words didn't sound good to the ear, they weren't good enough for the eye. But, of course, nobody is praised by everyone. McCullough's massive popularity and his whole writer-first approach definitely drew some serious criticism from the academic world.
This quote from a discussion between historians really nails the core of the critique. The argument goes that his focus on inspiring stories and heroic figures often presents a triumphalist version of American history, one that kind of emphasizes the wins and the idea of American exceptionalism, maybe at the expense of a more complex or critical look. So, to really get this critique, we need to understand this word, historiography. It's not just the study of what happened in the past, it's the study of how history gets written. It's basically an ongoing conversation among historians about different interpretations, sources, and biases. So, the heart of the complaint is that McCullough often worked outside of that academic conversation. By focusing so intensely on building a gripping story from a handful of primary sources, critics say his work can sometimes sidestep these bigger academic debates, and what you get is something some called a pageant of great men, instead of a more nuanced historical analysis.
So, how do we square this circle? How do we reconcile the very valid academic critique with his undeniable, massive impact?
Well, you have to put that critique up against powerful testimonials like this one. For countless teachers and students, McCullough wasn't distorting history. He was the gateway drug. He made the past accessible, exciting, and relevant in a way that dense academic papers often just can't. He made people care.
And this brings us right back to McCullough's own mission. Remember, he saw himself as a writer. His goal wasn't to win a debate with other academics. It was to write literature. He wanted to create something that moved the reader, that moved him. So in the end, maybe judging his work with a purely academic yardstick is missing the point. His goal wasn't to write for other historians in the ivory tower. It was to tell true, powerful stories that would connect the American people to their own past, and in doing that, maybe spark a national love for history itself.
And that leaves us with this fascinating and maybe unanswerable question. Is it better to have a history that's debated and academically precise for a small audience, or a history that captures the imagination of millions and inspires them to start their own journey of discovery? You know, perhaps, just maybe, we need both.